Today I'm talking about a 20 chaos gem that almost nobody uses, that absolutely breaks Viper Strike of the Mamba, taking our damage and clear to ridiculous heights. What's up, YouTube? It's your boy AP, and today we're going over Awakened Melee Splash. This skill gem has insane synergy with our build. The way it works is it causes all our strikes to have an AoE splash, and each enemy hit by each of those splashes will roll individually. Our build scales up to 5 strikes, which when combined with our strike range and the support gem means there's absolutely zero aiming required with our skill anymore. You can click literally anywhere and the whole screen will get hit. The sheer coverage from the splash on top of the 5 strikes also just dramatically improves clear via our proliferation. It feels super smooth to play, but that's not even why this is so broken. The real power behind this gem is how it scales our damage. Pathfinder innately has this problem, where only 20% of our attacks get the Master Toxicist Ascendancy proc for 100% more damage. So that's normally 1 in 5 hits, which is why scaling strikes is so nice. But now, instead of simply rolling 5 times for 5 strikes, we could be rolling over 100 times because of the splash, assuming we're running a dense enough strat, such as Breach Risk strat. And in order to visually demonstrate this to you guys, we can run a T16.5 map, which has 94% chance for monsters to avoid poison, as well as 90% chance for monsters to block our attacks. This is the absolute worst case situation I could come up with, where a character will have a 0.6% of actually doing any damage with a hit. So I'm just going to cut to some B-roll right now of this exact situation. Obviously, this doesn't look great. It's literally the 2 worst mods, and we do actually only have a 0.6 chance to get a poison off of a proc. But as you can see, we do eventually poison these packs. It might take 2 or 3 hits, but this is more of a demonstration that even in such ridiculous cases with these odds stacked against us, the sheer power of Awakened Melee Splash will brute force the application of the poison. To contextualize why this is important outside of these terrible modifiers, which you might not want to run regardless because of the implications when going against a singular enemy, I should just reiterate, the point of this demo is to show that we will always be getting 100% more damage from Master Toxicist now. Also, the Betrayal Sting, which has a 48% chance of proccing double damage, will stack on top of the Master Toxicist bonus. And these odds are many magnitudes higher than that 0.6 situation we just demoed, so they are all but guaranteed on every single hit when you're mapping. The conclusion here is that with this gem, we should basically always be at dot cap, even if we're doing crazy deli stuff with massive DR penalties, and even if we're having pretty bad gear on a league start. Now, the final note, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm pretty sure that since all these strikes and splashes are being done simultaneously, they are all applying their poisons to the enemy, since these hits are being applied at the same time to an unpoisoned enemy, which is the condition that Viper Strike needs in order to do damage. But don't quote me on this. Regardless if we're getting 100 poisons or not, the gem is absolutely cracked. We get pushed up to dot cap so easily, and it is an absolute must-have for dense mapping strategies where the clear just goes through the roof. The one situation you wouldn't necessarily want to use this setup is on single target, such as Uber bossing. You can technically cheese multiple strikes with stuff like the Worm Flask or the new unique ring that spawns worms, but realistically I would just suggest swapping this out for overexertion support when you're doing Uber bossing. It's another red gem and it's great for single target. As for how you should apply this directly to our Mamba build, I recommend pulling out Awakened Added Lightning from our 6th link in order to fit the gem in. I also recommend using Ancestral Cry in our auto exertion setup, which makes it a 4 link now with Alchemist Mark and Battle Mage's Cry. We have to drop a gem somewhere, and I drop Volgrace. Ancestral Cry gives us 2 additional strikes, which is very powerful with or without Woke Splash, but it's especially important with Woke Splash. If you're not playing my build, don't worry, because you can sub this tech into literally any Mamba Strike build out there. Okay, that wraps up the scripted portion of this video going over Melee Splash, and now I want to talk about a few things that could help people who are having issues with the build, and we're going to wrap up the video going over some ways to take the 50 div endgame guide and make it a lot more expensive, but also a lot more powerful. For everybody having trouble, I recommend you going to Act 1 and just walking into a zone and seeing what happens. You do not want your Merc to be doing damage, because if he's doing damage, he may be applying a poison, and if he's applying a poison, you don't do damage. So let's just see what happens here. I'm not going to attack. And you see, these monsters are not taking damage. This is what you want to see. If he's killing these monsters, it's terrible. Now, technically speaking, this Merc can kill enemies because he has this reflect damage on melee attacks, or reflects damage from melee attackers. But that's not really causing an issue because this takes a while to proc it. I don't think it poisons. And the real thing is if they use poisoning. I'm hitting stuff pretty fast, but if you have like some toxic rain guy, it could just be completely breaking your build. It's the first thing to check. Now, in the build guide, I did suggest a particular helmet to block this from happening, which is Akoya's Gaze. Non-exerted attacks deal no damage. So this is assuming your Merc doesn't exert attacks. And if you're using the Blade Bitter like I suggest, it will work. But I do realize some of you people are just using random mercenaries, so I do need to give you guys some more generic solutions to this. You could try Zoph's Blood, which converts all our damage to fire. That's possibly a way. Although realistically, you just don't want your Merc to do any damage at all, because if he does damage, the enemy's not at full life. And we can still apply poison, but it does mess with our crit chance. So the ideal solution is just to completely stop him from doing damage. Wilma's Requital is a slightly more universal way than Akoya's Gaze, because this blocks non-exerted attacks. This just means as long as your guy doesn't have totems, he shouldn't be doing any damage because he's Ancestral Bond. This is a more universal solution. And obviously, depending on your Merc, you don't really want it, like, you could take off the weapons and then he won't do damage probably. But my guy's applying 3 curses with his attack. So I do want him to attack, I just don't want him to do damage. So this is sort of a case-by-case basis, but that's how you would troubleshoot the most likely cause of the build feeling kind of janky. Okay. Now for some build upgrades. If you're going off my 50 div budget version, I think your first upgrade should be Progenesis. This will drastically improve the survivability of our build because it 25% of damage occurs over 4 seconds instead, which means we're taking like a massive chunk less damage. And that's actually going to be a lot more than 25% effect because we have so many ways to scale our flask effect. There's the Tides of Time. We have it all over the tree. But this is extreme value on Pathfinder. It's so much value that I almost suggest you don't ever upgrade to a Mage Blood because this gets buffed from Tides of Time, first of all, and the Divine Flask has really good synergy with Petrified Blood and Progenesis, which are both basically the same sort of damage reduction, because all of this damage is being delayed over a period of time, and this Life Flask is just constantly ticking with a massive amount of regen. Now, another way I improved the build was I used 3 passive voices instead of 5 passive. If you're able to afford this upgrade, you get 2 passive points back, and then you can invest in something like Recoup. Now, Recoup gives us health back over 4 seconds, which is the same duration as this damage happens to us. So Recoup just pairs very, very well with, Petrified Blood, Progenesis. It's a little bit of extra recovery for that. Some other things to mention. I do have quite a big mana pool. In fact, this is arguably too big of a mana pool, but it does let me do no recovery maps, no regen maps, because even if Clarity is turned off, the sheer amount of hits we're doing with Awaken Melee Splash will leech this back. So having a slightly higher mana pool is kind of nice anyways, and the way I'm getting it so high is we have a Rune Graft for 15% reservation efficiency, and this actually also works in your life pool. So the Clarity is costing us less life, and it's also all our auras are costing us less mana. The downside is auras from your skills affect enemies. However, we don't care if they're element immune from purity of elements, and we don't care if they have clarity either. So there's no downside. It's an option. Another rune graft I like to use is Rune Graft of the Warp. So buffs on your character expire 30% slower. I love shrines. This makes shrines so much better. Debuffs expire on you faster. This is actually pretty good sleeper mod for T17 maps because there are some really nasty debuffs, such as the one where you can't deal damage for, is it like 3 seconds out of 10 seconds? And there's also the debuff where you take increased damage. There's a bunch of debuffs, and it's just a good value for 1 point. So yeah, my big upgrades were Progenesis Flasks around 80 divs. I'm not sure what Voice's 3 passives cost right now, but that would be a luxury item you could save for. And I'll include the path of building of my current setup in the video description. You know, not too much has changed. I got a little bit more strike range, but it's essentially the same character with these 3 upgrades and some tinker around with the rare gear. All right, I hope you enjoyed the video. There should be a playlist in the video description for all the Mamba/Peaconk material I've put out so far. Strongly urge you to check that out if you haven't. Also, if you are having any issues with the build, you should join the Discord community. There's a lot of friendly people in there, and the build feels so nice once you iron out all the initial kinks of trying to swap your character over. So it is worth putting in the effort to get the build functional. Again, I give a lot of tips in the 50 Divine initial build guide, and also some tips a little earlier in this video on what could be causing your issues, and that will likely solve it. But, you know, don't give up on the build. Truly, this is one of the most insane builds out there, and I think it's really good value for investment. Honestly, just really good in general, no matter what investment. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Like and subscribe, or Chris Wilson will steal your drops.